Hello, everybody. My name's Ed Pavlik. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky, where we have pretty good weather today. And my colleague is,
Frank Lawton from London in the United Kingdom, and we're enjoying very much it's what we call it an Indian summer. I suspect this is when we ruled India, where it was warm in late Indian summer, but it's been very pleasant. This is our third or fourth recognized heat wave this year, so things are definitely warming up at this end of the world.
well, Frank, you've been to the Arctic. Tell us what that was like.
Yes, it was a very small ship. Well, it was only about 110 people on board. Very nice crew, fantastic scenery. Obviously, we went from Longyearbyen, which is it was founded by an American actually in Svalbard or Spitsbergen as it's called now, because it was a great mining was the thing, and it was a huge coal industry until fairly recently. There've been a series of quite tragic accidents where a lot of miners died. So there's still the remnants of the coal mine there, and fishing, obviously. The scenery is breathtaking. We went right up to the ice sheet, so we were at 81 degrees north. We were only about 900 miles from the North Pole. We couldn't go much further because of the ice flow. But our captain was saying that 3 years ago we wouldn't even have been able to get there because the ice was so much further south. So sadly, it looks like global warming is affecting that, and someday soon it might well be that these damn boats can go all the way to the North Pole. It was a wonderful experience, fantastic wildlife. One day, a mother polar bear and her two cubs came right up to the boat, and the captain, who he was a sort of grizzled old sea dog, who I think had been doing this trip for 15 years, said it's the first time ever that the polar bears have come right up to the ship. It was a really stunning scene, because normally if there's polar bears around, we had a lot of on Zodiac boats, we'd go to various islands and walk around, but the first thing that the people on board did, they would go with their rifles, and if they saw polar bears they would cancel the visit. You can't go within 500 meters of a polar bear unless you've got a rifle with you. They are vicious creatures. They look beautiful, but they're not.
Well, I'm glad you made it back.
Yes.
Today we're going to consider the question, is cervical cancer increasing, especially in older women? And answers to these questions are approached in two papers. One is titled Increasing Cervical Cancer Rates Among Women Age 35 to 54 in Canada. And that covers the years 1992 to 2022. The other paper is High Risk HPV Distribution and Importance on Continuing Cervical Cancers, Screening of Women age 65 years and older, a study based on over 2 million women in China. The first paper was published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology Advances, and the second paper was published in Gynecology and Obstetrics in Clinical Medicine. What I'll call to your attention is first the paper out of China, and this is, like I said a second ago, this is a big study, and it has over 2 million people in it. And it gets to the heart of the issue of what's happening with regard to people who are older. So if you look at what it covers the data is collected over the period 2017 to 2023 with vaccination starting in China 1 year earlier in 2016. So this is actually from the standpoint of framing it in data considered and vaccination are going to be a different paper than the next paper that I'll talk about. This looks really at what you can expect immediately after a vaccination program starts. And the inclusion of data has 14 high-risk HPV genotypes that have been collected. So it does do a good job of relating things to the genotypes that are at risk for cervical cancer. So basically, if we look at the middle column versus the far right column, you can see that older people have an increased chance of having high risk HPV. They have a high risk of having cervical intraepithelial neoplasia grade 2 or above. They have a cancer rate that's 9 times greater than the younger people. And then if you look at the expression of the genotypes, if just one high-risk genotype is expressed, once again, older people have a greater percentage in that category. Same way, if 2 high-risk genotypes are expressed, as well as for 3 and also for multiples. So the paper really then shows you some things that are and information about older people. If you look at basically the single risk and on to the multiple risk, we can see that something that's a low risk genotype in younger people becomes more frequent. This is true in the double risk category, shown by the yellow, and also shown by the red and the triple risk, as well as in the multi-risk. So one of the things we can say is the genotypes for high risk in older people are different than in younger people. Now, with that in mind, it comes to a very logical question. The guidelines basically says at 64 or 65, screening should stop. And basically, this report from China indicates that there are high risk genotypes for HPV that occur in these women, and also there's an elevated cancer risk in these women also. The conclusions are that there is a heavier cervical cancer burden in these women, and there's a higher prevalence of sort of unique human HPV, and also a greater rate of CIN2 or above. So the long and the short of this paper is that we have to realize that for this study, the vaccination rate was low, it was 2.25%. And that's going to really affect, the data that was collected. It began a year before the data collection period that was studied here was presented. It means that, we probably have to do this study again, certainly in 10 years when there's really more of a catch-up, if there is a catch-up. So that's the first paper. And now the next paper is looking, excuse me, looking at the Canadian phenomenon. And in Canada, what they've done is they've catched the study over a data study period that runs for about 30 years. So they started the data study from 1992 to 2022, and it covers a vaccination in Canada that began in 2007 and 2010, which is to say that this beginning of vaccination occurred smack dab in the middle of the study period, which means that they can study things before vaccination and what was happening, and things after vaccination to see basically if the incidence rate of cervical cancer is changing. And of course, we're led to believe, and have been led to believe, due to the success of the HPV vaccines, that we're going to be seeing decreases in the incidence rate. Now, what's happening here is that for younger women, age 25 to 34, the incidence rate of cervical cancer decreased since 1992. That's where the big effect was. Probably a lot of these women received their vaccination when they were under 15. And so it's a big group primed for success. Now, if you move older, to older women, you start entering a catch-up group, and you see that there is an improvement. In other words, there is an improvement of things happening here, but that improvement seems to be lost. And the catch-up group listen, this is probably it, really is return to the incidents that first had in 1992. And this may indicate that there is a prevention gap. Later on, the incidents increased annually since 2012, quite late into the data presentation period. And then as we get to older women, we see that it's increasing, the incidence is decreasing up until 2015, and then followed by a small increase. And the same thing is true for ages 65 through 74, where the incidence rates are having smaller decreases. When we get to the older women, basically they are simply in an ongoing decrease, and it's probably because when inoculation of the vaccine started, they were perceived as being too old for that risk group, and not engaging in sex with partners that might be carriers of HPV. They did notice that there were differences relative to the birth cohort, or when someone who was 65, what threshold they were in terms of the time period of data collection. Now, based upon the screening rate in Canada, it's much higher than in China. It was 60 to 70%, but it's regarded as suboptimal. And the thing to keep in mind that is someone who was vaccinated at age 51 would be the youngest person in the older age category. And that supports what I was saying about why people would probably not, in this age group, many of them would not really be recommended for vaccination. So what do I think about the whole thing? Once again, very similar to what I thought about the first paper, and that's that we should begin to believe that that it's legitimate to continue screening older women. I mean, we can't afford to gamble that that they're safe, and it's whether they've been inoculated with a vaccine or not, the risk numbers are there. Okay, the protective effect for the younger women, are there, and that's probably due to vaccination. But I think over the years we're going to see two things. That one, the HPV genotypes change towards something that evades our current vaccines, and the other thing is we're going to get a sort of interesting rebound due to the recommendation for screening, that there's going to be people who really are recommended to not be screened because of their age, who are going to present with probably what is required for them, a longer period for those virus incorporations to become cancerous. Frank, what do you think?
Yes, it was interesting. I thought the Chinese study showing the variety or the range of HPV genotypes. I mean, the vaccines will not be touching these, or at least I don't think they are for all of them. So I think you're right. Viruses mutate, of course. And if we are preventing virus reproduction or whatever in the so-called high-risk groups that we've got, 6, 11, 16, 18, whatever, then we're going to see an increase in the ones that are not going to be affected by the vaccine. And these, as has been shown in the China study, are in the older women. I think that if you wanted proof that vaccination was working, I think the Canadian paper shows that, or that providing you vaccinate enough people. And I was very, very surprised that the data was 48% of women aged 14 to 49 in Canada have no primary health care physician, presumably because of the geography, the huge country of Canada. And in between 2010 and 2013, 30% of eligible women had no screening. So the screening program doesn't work unless we screen people, and we vaccinate them. And I think you're right, Ed. If this study was repeated in a few years' time, the China study, I think we may well find a lot increased incidence of CIN and cervical cancer associated with this whole new set of HPVs that we've really not ignored, but we haven't produced the vaccines for.
You're right, and I would add that to a certain extent, in the States, we struggle with the costs of medical care. And so we've, especially with cervical cancer, have had major changes in when women should get screened, at what ages, and at what interval, and when they should stop being screened. And I cannot help but believe that a lot of this consideration is financial, to keep the burden of cost and the insurer's profits in the direction that is meaningful to some people, but not necessarily to the population.
Mm. Yes, I think the the stopping screening at the age of 65 very much is based on whether or not you've been HPV positive with the 4 or 5 major HPV genotypes. That's why the screening stops. So the Chinese have discovered or shown that a lot more involved in, and I think that is where the impetus and the pressure for not stopping the screening program would work until we've got a better treatment of these oncogenic viruses.
That's right. And one of the benefits is we're talking about those older women who comprise one of the smallest segments of populations. I mean, to deny them, this protection, in that sense, doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. And the idea that older women will not avail themselves of screening, I don't believe it's true. In fact, I have data from a study I did a long time ago that says that is not true. Older women are just as interested in their health care as younger women, and I think a screening program should be offered. Obviously, it's all very well us sitting in and say, yeah, that's a good idea, but we don't know how often. We don't know if there is an end point. We don't know that if you're HPV negative from the age of 35, something awful is going to happen to you if you're in a monogamous relationship. All those things are going to be taken into consideration. But I think, as you said, this disadvantages older women, and we don't really have the data to prove that it's not a disadvantage. I think it is a disadvantage, and something needs to be addressed.
Very good. Well, we're in agreement. I always dread the time when we won't be. And because I'll be saying, what was I thinking?
I'd just like people to know that we don't rehearse these. These are live. There's no editing out, so the bloops and whatever else. And we don't really discuss the cases all we discuss is which one are you interested in, Ed, and which one am I interested in? And then we work around it. But this is completely live, one-off. There's no rehearsals for this. So eventually we will disagree, but at the moment I think we're okay.
That's right. And I think the main thing is that we preserve the authenticity rather than, surrender to some sort of staging.
Oh,
So,
sure.
so we are what you see. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Under the hood.
Yeah. Okay, Frank, we'll see you
All right,
again
Ed.
next time.
See you. Bye bye now. Bye bye.
Bye.